So what even is understitching anyways? So a lot of times you'll be sewing a garment and the garment will have a lining on the inside and you don't want this lining to start flipping up and showing through to the outside. But you also don't want a visible line of top stitching along that neckline. So what you will instead do is something called understitching. And you can see on here, it's that line of stitching right there, very, very close to where the lining fabric is sewn to the outside fabric. And what you're essentially doing with this line of stitching is you are sewing the seam allowance from where the outside fabric and the lining meets. You're taking that seam allowance and you're stitching it only to your lining, so then that helps keep everything in place and prevents it from flipping out. It is very common to do understitching at necklines, but you may also see it in armholes with sleeveless garments as well. Over here at the sewing machine, before I do my understitch, I've sewn what is my fake neckline. This will be the main fabric. This will be my lining fabric. The first thing you're going to do is do any clipping into your seam allowances that you need to do, especially if you have a V neckline. And then you're just going to take your fabric and you're going to spread it apart. You're going to do it with the right side. Remember, this is the main fabric. This is the lining. Right side facing up. You're going to take the seam allowance and make sure it is going towards the lining side, and you are going to stitch right beside that part where the two lines meet up. In terms of seam allowance, this is not technically a seam that we are sewing, so there is no seam allowance, but usually you want to get about 1/8 of an inch away from here for your understitching. And as I do this, I have to make sure to spread out the fabric and feel with my fingers to make sure that my seam allowance is still going towards my lining. And this is another situation in which you'll want to line things up with your presser foot or possibly move your needle instead of lining things up to anything on your needle plate. Now, I don't like pressing my lines before I understitch because oftentimes understitching is done on a curve and it is not possible to really press this curve apart very neatly. And personally, I think I get a better result without pressing it first. Now you can see I have understitched this, and when I go to give it a final pressing in the way that it's going to lay at the end, I won't see any stitching out on the right side of my fabric, and I will see understitching, which is why it's called understitching, on my lining. Now, it is very common for you to not be able to understitch all the way around a neckline or armhole without breaking the line of stitching. If that happens, don't worry about it. Do your back stitch and stop there. You don't actually have to stitch all the way around if you are not able to. I hope this helps. Happy sewing, and if you enjoy my videos, consider checking out my Ko-fi page.